The mid-20th century was the golden age of illustrations in the United States, when there was no television. Rockwell's work were everywhere. Summer McGunton said that they grew up with his work, and then the slide only pop-up poster at Rockwell's. He painted book illustrations, magazine covers, advertisements, and movie posters. Throughout his career, he had been commissioned by more than 150 corporations, such as Life, Ford, Pan American Airlines, Kellogg Cornflakes, Pepsi, and Pepsi Royal Coca-Cola. Norman Rockwell is an illustrator and painter whose style is photorealism or realism, which most of the time was exaggerated with his great sense of humor and his caricature. His paintings are filled with matured kids, pets like cats and dogs, husband, wife, and kindly. These characters will be seen in his work throughout his career. Because of his ability to tell a story through one picture, he was remembered as a storyteller. He normally painted on large canvas to fill in all of the details, so the painting can become more detailed when it is reduced in size to be reproduced. He also painted his whites thicker than the other colors in his painting, so that when it was photographed, the light would naturally create the shadow on the picture, so he didn't have to paint the shadow by himself. To achieve those lifelike details, he used models to pose for him at first. He even posed it by himself to demonstrate them from time to time. Later, in many of his paintings, he used photograph instead by projecting them onto his canvas and tracing them. Sometimes, an average of 100 photos were used per one painting. Rockwell directed the photos, which featured dozens of new photographers and models who happened to be his neighbors and friends. Norman Rockwell, who was born in New York City in 1894, didn't do well in the normal high school, as his path was in the artistic world. As a result, he studied in the New York School of Art, formerly the Shears School of Art, for a while when he was 14. In 1910, he moved to the National Academy of Design. Then he transferred to the Art Student Leagues in 1912, where he prepared himself for his career, and studied with Thomas Fogarty, who taught him illustrations, and George Bridgman, who taught him technical skills. When he was 17, he was the art director of Boy's Life and even illustrated its weekly magazine from 1912 until 1917. Later, he did come back to them and did a scouting theme painting each year for their calendar from 1924 until he died. After he moved to New Russia in 1915 with Molly Peterson, his first wife, and shared a studio with Clive Forsyth, who's an illustrator for Saturday Evening Post or The Post. He was able to send his first cover for The Post in 1916 and had worked for them for the next 46 years. His first cover was called Boy with Baby Carriage, which reflects a change of society towards societal roles. He made 323 covers in total for The Post, and a tremendous amount of copies were sold. His cover with The Post made him famous, as once Rockwell used to say that The Post was the greatest show window in America. Since The Post was highly strict and conservative, they have a lot of control over the artists. Even though America was undergoing the Great Depression during the 1930s, he still chose to paint only the bright side instead of reality. Above all, The Post also wanted light-hearted covers during this turmoil. Regrettably, his work during this period did not exclude much diversity. We can only see white people and mostly middle-class people on The Post covers, because Rollimer, The Post editor from 1899 until 1936, directed him not to include people of color. The artists were not allowed to paint colored people whose jobs are not in the service industry, such as a black man who's the waiter on the side in Boy in a Dining Car. To further support the claim, we could see a painting that he painted Liv Huanga for American magazine in 1936. And he didn't have a problem to paint this whole black community as part of the main attention. In 1938, he found out the love of his life and married Mary Bastow. After they moved to Vermont, he started to capture small-town American life in his work and made him a part of the American regionalism movement that flourished during the 1930s until 1940s. For instance, Marvel's Champion was his first painting in Vermont, depicting a girl who is challenging two boys in her neighborhood. In his early paintings, it shows how Americans cope with their lives, and some view it as an ideal America, or the America that Rockwell imagined. He was seen as the portrayer of the American dream. He could also capture nostalgia of simple moments, such as a typical scene of a grandfather playing with his grandchildren, especially during the 1910s and 1920s. Unfortunately, the narrowed style that he did for the post and the fact that he painted plenty of commissions on top of the rise of modern art, such as abstract expressionism, made him get criticism being only an illustrator or a commercial artist and not an artist. For Rockwell, he always called himself as an illustrator, but how people call him is up to debate. He was aware of the modern art movement and respected them, especially Pollock. To show respect, he even imitated Pollock's work in one of his paintings called The Connoisseur. He always doubts his ability to paint because he can't paint like them. He went to Europe a lot to find some new inspiration. Nevertheless, we can't deny that his paintings were like a chronicle of America, as he kept painting these following themes throughout his career, including the life of Americans that I mentioned earlier, especially youth. Rockwell loved painting kids and letting them be kids in his painting. Sometimes kids stumble or face an identity crisis. They might do something wrong and might run away, like this little boy in this picture with an officer. He just captured them the way they are. Moreover, he included inventions and changes in his paintings. The creation of automobiles, the flourish of the radio unto television, and the time that a person could fly to Alaska for the first time, until they have a commercial for an airplane. He had lived through all of it. Plus, he even witnessed a man walk on the moon. He mentioned all of those changes in his paintings, including American entertainment like baseball, until the birth of Hollywood, or even teenage tradition like prom. It's not only the society he captured through his work, but also politics. Every time there was an election, he would paint a picture about it. He worshipped the American spirit and has painted every president from Eisenhower through Nixon, as well as other notable Americans, such as Benjamin Franklin. Abraham Lincoln was the president that he admired the most. He even painted 6 paintings of Abraham Lincoln for different magazines, and even featured him in his early painting called Law Student in 1927. He shifted his focus to politics in 1940s when America entered wartime, or the Second World War. President Franklin Roosevelt's speech in 1941 inspired him to create the Full Freedoms painting in 1943. To talk about the faux paintings, Freedom from One is a scene of a family on a Thanksgiving day. It's the most famous one, but it was his least favorite. People believe that it is one of the paintings that perfectly portray the idea of the American dream. Next, we have Freedom from Fear. It shows a father holding a newspaper with a headline of an ongoing war. He putting his children to sleep so they can be free from the fear. Freedom of Speech is featured with actors who play roles associated with the right to be heard, such as Gregory Peck, who starred in To Kill a Mockingbird. This shows how detailed he was. Moreover, in Freedom to Worship, he portrayed people praying in many different ways to avoid stereotypes. This also shows how sensitive he was and how he wanted to please everyone. In addition, he once said, "Most of the time, I try to entertain with my post covers." At first, the U.S. Army Art and Corps refused to take these paintings. As a result, he came back to the post, and Ben Hibbs, the new director, accepted it. Unsurprisingly, it became a success. Later, in May 1943, the Post and the U.S. Department of the Treasury went on a tour with the faux freedom paintings and sold copies of the paintings and stamps. These works helped the U.S. raise war bonds over $132 million. During this wartime, he also created a fictional character named Willie Gliss, who is GI or an American soldier. He created Willie to be like the boy next door or the boy in everyone's family, to make them feel connected and sympathetic, so people could appreciate the sacrifice of those who fight on the home front. Moreover, Willie was used to comfort the family member who was waiting for the loved one to come back. This would be like a thing for the family to hold on to. Willie's series has 11 paintings that depict a story of the GI since being sent there until discharge, and of course there's no scene of battles. To talk about some of the pieces in this series, this is Willie Gliss on KP. Willie's peeling potatoes while keeping in touch with his hometown news. Rockwell painted this to assure the family that the loved one is still alive, as you can still receive the family pass out a letter, as you can see the letter in the bottom right. Or another piece called Package from Home, which Willie received food from his mother. Despite the fact that he created this series of comical life of military service and didn't include any battle scene in the series, and some think it's toned down the reality of the war, he painted Let's Give Him Enough and On Time to make us know that he was also aware of the brutality of the war. Another famous fictional character during wartime is Rosie. He painted Rosie the Riveter with Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf under her feet, and she has the same pose as Michelangelo's prophet Isaiah. It's a part of propaganda to recruit women, and it is a symbol that shows how women's workforce is as crucial as men. After his studio was burned down in 1943 and all of his costumes and props were turned into ashes, he began to concentrate on the world outside his mind rather than nostalgia and how his paintings convey feelings. However, he didn't paint much of the political painting and returned to his common theme of American life. For instance, Shuffling Barbershop. It's a scene of a barbershop that was turned to a place for friends to hang out at the end of the day. Those lights and shadows create mood and tone and led us to the scene of the peaceful moment, and it reminded us of one of our own. He was able to achieve this complexity of light and shadow with the help of a camera. In 1953, he moved to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and started working with Look magazine in 1961 instead of the Post. He moved here so Mary could cure her alcoholism. Later, he needed to cure his depression as well, and he met a psychiatrist named Erik Erikson, who researched racial prejudice and identity crisis. He might influence Rockwell alongside Look magazine's encouragement to paint social and political issues. The action resulted in Rockwell's style in this period. Above all, many of his acquaintances said that his third wife, Irene O'Connor, whom he married in 1961, is the one who encouraged him to become more liberal and bold. His topics of the painting was leaning towards social issues. In his late work, when he was getting older, he started to accept favored advertisement commissions. As Rockwell said, the commission limits his originality because of their requirements. This made him able to paint a painting like The Golden Rule in 1961. It was filled with men, women, and children of different race, religions, and ethnicity. It includes a common moral that every religion has in the middle, which basically means treating others the way we want them to treat us. Another iconic painting of him during this time is The Problem We All Live With. It is a painting of Ruby Bridges, an African American girl being escorted to school by United States Marshals. This was Rockwell's way of raising racial issues and segregation in the era of the civil rights protest. He died in 1979 and left his last paintings, Sergeant and Concapod, unfinished.